Welcome to A Matter of Perspective with Judge Derwin Webb. I am Derwin Webb, coming to you from the Fraser History Museum. You know, it's not too often that you get a chance to talk to someone that's a legend himself. So I am happy, pleased, and honored to welcome the Honorable Mayor Jerry Abramson. Mayor Abramson, good afternoon. How are you doing today?
Well, I'm doing great. It's good to be with you, and thanks for the invite.
Well, I appreciate it. I've been trying to get you on the show for a while. Our schedules haven't been able to coincide with one another, but I appreciate you so much for coming on here.
My pleasure.
This is a joy. This is my holiday joy. This is a joy for me. This is our last show before the holidays, last show of the calendar year, and I couldn't think of I couldn't think of a better person to bring on to talk about life, talk about the city, talk about why we're here and what we're doing, than to bring on you. So I graciously thank you for being here today. Mr. Mayor, and I want to call you that, but gosh, it depends on where you are.
I've been called worse.
Well, I came here from Indianapolis. I know you as mayor.
Right.
There are some other people that know you as lieutenant governor.
Right.
The other people know you as special assistant to President Obama. So there are different titles that you go by. What do you prefer to be called?
You know, Jerry's fine, but most people call me mayor.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're from
21
here.
years will do it.
Well, like I said, that's how I know you from. You started off. You're originally from Louisville.
I am from Louisville.
Went to
Seneca High School grad. With Wes Unseld. Wes Unseld and I graduated Seneca together. Diane Sawyer was a year ahead of us. And as I tell Darrell Griffin all the time, although he was a great basketball player, there was a young man named Mike Redd who played at Seneca 2 years before Wes Unseld and I graduated, who I think was the best basketball player I've ever seen in high school. Seneca was a great place to go to school, and I was fortunate to attend.
Wow, that's saying a lot about Mr. Redd, I'll tell you that.
He was a superstar. I went down to Taylor County to watch him play Clem Haskins. Heads up, they each scored about 25, 26 points against each other. Clem Haskins was a tremendous ball player, but Mike went on, scored 45 points in the state, I think, semi-championship. We won back-to-back state championships at Seneca. Wes Unseld played a major role in our junior and senior year successes. So Seneca was a major part in my life. You know, back in those days, you started high school in the county in the 7th grade. So I was at Seneca from the 7th through the 12th grade. And when I started in the 7th grade, Seneca only went to the 10th. George Unseld was in that senior class, as was Linda Sawyer, who was Miss Kentucky and was Diane's older sister. She was in that senior class. They started as 10th graders, 11th graders, 12th graders, and then they graduated, and we had a full high school.
Wow, that's a lot of history right there.
Yeah, it was a big time at the time.
What was life for you growing up here?
Well, you know, the great thing about Seneca High School is it was located specifically by the school board to have an integrated high school based on neighborhoods. So there was, because the Newburgh neighborhood was in the Seneca district, Seneca High School was about a third African American, a third Jewish, interestingly enough, because it had the Highlands in there, and a third everything else. So high school was an opportunity to meet people of different backgrounds, different races, different backgrounds and experiences, ethnicity. I learned a lot. My mom and dad and my grandparents had a grocery in Smoketown for 53 years on the corner of Preston and Jacob. I mean, I used to deliver groceries to Shepherd Square, as an example, where Darrell Owens was living at the time. And, you know, I knew that neighborhood and had been in that neighborhood as it was predominantly white, then it became mixed, then it became predominantly African-American, Smoketown. And as a result, I felt very comfortable entering Seneca in this mixed environment. They kept saying it was a test. You know, could this work out in a school where all of us got on buses, not because of busing, but because that's what the county did. They got you into school that way. And mixed races, mixed religion, mixed gender, it was just a tremendous experience. I loved every bit of it. I really did.
Well, how did that form you?
Well, you know, I learned a lot. I was on the debate team. I learned a lot in that regard. John Yarmouth, our congressman, was on the debate team over to Atherton, and we used to go head-to-head. He was a year behind me. I was in the marching band, and that gave me an opportunity to have a whole different aspect of my life. I really played trumpet, But because Seneca was just starting as a high school, if you played French horn, you got a marching band uniform. If you played trumpet, we had enough trumpet players. You didn't get a uniform. So I played French horn. So it was a good experience in that regard. I met a lot of folks. I learned a lot. The counselors were helpful. The teachers were helpful. And it gave me a running start into, adulthood.
Okay, speaking of adulthood, you graduate from Seneca High School and go to Indiana University.
Right.
What made you pick that school? You had University of Louisville there, and I'm sure
Right.
you had a whole host of other schools you were thinking about. What was it about Bloomington?
Number one, if you've ever been to the campus, it's just magnificent. It's so beautiful. Just so beautiful. Number two, I was able to get into the honors program. So here I was at a Big Ten school with all that a Big Ten school could offer in small classes. I'd gotten into Vanderbilt. I'd gotten into Colgate. I'd gotten turned down at Yale. And so I decided I was going to go to IU and get the big school atmosphere and excitement, and ultimately, but with smaller classes. And it worked out well because my senior year, we went to the Rose Bowl, which was just an incredible senior year gift for all of us. We lost 14-3. We played USC. They had a running back named O.J. something.
Simpson, I believe it was. Yes.
They had a lineman named Ron Yary, Y-A-R-Y, on that USC team. Started for the Minnesota Vikings the next year. He opened up holes, Judge, that you and I could have run through. But we lost the game, but it was a great experience. And so IU was good to me, and it really was my opportunity to get involved in thinking about public service. Robert Kennedy is the reason I'm in. I committed my career.
I'm so glad you're saying that, because I was going to ask you what made you want to go in that. I know that college is a microcosm of life, as they say.
Very much so.
So what about Robert Kennedy?
Well, my senior year in college, Robert Kennedy decided to run for president. And the first primary that he entered was the Indiana primary. There was a guy named Brannigan who was the governor at the time of Indiana, and he was the favorite son carrying the banner of Lyndon Johnson in that primary. Robert Kennedy decided he was going to run for president. Indiana was the first primary. I offered to be president or chairman or whatever the term was at the time of Students for Kennedy. I was taking my last semester at IU, all pass-fail. Those were the days. So I literally left and traveled and introduced them at Notre Dame and Franklin College and Evansville and Hanover. Wherever he spoke to students, I was there. And as I watched and as I listened, I was with him the night that he announced in Indianapolis that Dr. Martin Luther King had been assassinated. I was there in Indianapolis 3.5 hours late. He was 3.5 hours late for the event. And that's when the mayor of Indianapolis said to Senator Kennedy, we can't protect you if you go into that neighborhood. And it was a predominantly African-American neighborhood. They'd been waiting for 3.5 hours. Most, if not all of them, did not know that Dr. King had been shot. And literally the mayor of the city, who went on to be the United States Senator, trying to think of the name from Indiana. I don't know why it escapes me.
I should know this because I'm from Indianapolis.
As a Hoosier. I'll think of it. It wasn't Hudnut. It was the mayor before him. Said, we can't protect you. So we got in the car. I was in a van with just staff people. And we went toward the area of town where we were having the rally. And as soon as we got close to that neighborhood, the police cars peeled off and we went in on our own. Kennedy spoke a lot about what was on my mind, about Vietnam, about those less fortunate, about trying to make the world a better place. I was really, really energized by him. So when I graduated college, I decided once again I didn't get into Yale Law School after being turned down to Yale undergraduate. But it didn't bother me. I don't want you to think it bothered me. I decided I'd go to Washington and see if I could help in the campaign. I applied to Georgetown Law School. I got in. Then, of course, he was assassinated, and I went on to law school, but not to be involved, obviously, with him any longer. But he was the reason. We named the middle name of our son, Madeline, and our son is Robert, after Robert Kennedy. And he played the major role in my life that said to me, money's just not that important. I want to get involved in public service if I have the opportunity and try to make the place better than it was because I was engaged.
Tell me about your first opportunity to go into public service outside of the Kennedy.
It probably was, it was the Board of Aldermen. I ran for the Board of Aldermen representing the Highlands. There was about 7 candidates, and I was fortunate enough to win that election. And then after 2 terms as alderman, which is what we called it back in the day when the old city existed, separate from the old county, we had 12 aldermen. Each of us had a district, and mine was the Highlands. After spending 2 terms, I decided I wasn't a legislator. 2-year terms. It just wasn't where my head was. So I didn't run for a 3rd term. And about a year and a half later, John Y. Brown became governor. And he was a client of the law firm where I was practicing law. At the time, it was called Greenbaum, Dahl, and McDonald.
Know it well.
And at that time, we were the lawyers for Kentucky Fried Chicken, for the Kentucky Colonels, for Yum. Not Yum Brands, Lums, which he had started. Then he bought the Buffalo Braves and traded them for the Boston Celtics, and we were lawyers. So we had a long line of interaction with Governor Brown. He asked me if I would be general counsel and a part of his cabinet. I said I would. I spent little over 2 years driving back and forth to Frankfurt, working with the governor, learning about the state. And I enjoyed that, but the state really wasn't where my heart was. My heart was right here in my hometown. And so I came home, practiced law another year or 2, maybe 3, and then chose to put my name on the ballot to be mayor. There were 4 or 5 candidates in that primary. I was fortunate enough to be successful, won the general election, and proceeded into what I thought would be 1 4-year term. And that's because the Constitution of Kentucky in the late 1800s was rewritten so the mayor of Louisville, Lexington, and several other large cities could only have 1 term. It was literally written into the Constitution because they were afraid of the political organization like Tammany Hall in New York would take place in those big cities, and the legislature was extremely rural in nature and unfortunately continues to be in many ways. So I went in for 1 term, and in the middle of that first term, Fred the judge, who was the Attorney General of Kentucky, Fred Cowan, said, I'm going to introduce a constitutional amendment and put it on the ballot for the mayor of Louisville, Lexington, Covington, et cetera, to have 2 successive terms, 2 additional terms, which he did. It was passed. It was put on the ballot. It passed. Cities voted for it. Rural areas voted against it. And all of a sudden, I was sitting there as the first mayor in 100 years that had an opportunity to have another term and another term. And I actually believe that Louisville was held back as a result of having mayors who learned the job for a year, did the job for 2 years, and then ran for another job for the 4th year. So I made a commitment to stay and see if I could have continuity that would help my hometown.
For the individuals looking and listening to this, how were things then as compared to how they are now? What changes did you make initially?
Well,
I know that's a very broad question.
No, sure. I would tell you when people ask me as I left office, what was I most proud of? Folks always assumed it would be the brick and mortar stuff. I was leader on the airport expansion that created 26,000 jobs and brought in more passenger service and UPS expansion. I was the moving force on the baseball park to build the ballpark. The KFC Yum Center, worked on that. Worked across the street from here to develop and bring back Hilrick and Bradsby for the baseball bat factory. And so everybody was always thinking about bricks and mortars, that I could say I did that or I participated in that. I think it was the spirit of this community that I played a major role in. When I found this, when I took office in January 1 of '86, this community saw the glass always half empty. We just couldn't think of ourselves as folks that were being successful. And I tried, as you know, while I was doing these projects, when I was developing Operation Brightside to beautify the city and clean up the city and get people to engage in an understanding of the environment and show pride in their hometown through Brightside, all those things, I was trying to build up the pride that we had in ourselves and the yes we can attitude that we didn't have prior to me taking the office, and that we did have when I ultimately left office. So I take the most pride in my success of giving people an understanding that we can compete with anybody. We can be as successful as anybody. Our businesses, our neighborhoods, our schools, the Broad Foundation back in, I guess about 12 years ago out of LA, picked us as one of the top 5 public school systems in America. I mean, we really got people to understand that this was a place you ought to feel awfully good about, working here, raising your families here, and engaging in the civic part of the community.
I'm kind of smiling because I have a song playing in the back of my head. Look what we can do,
yeah,
Louisville.
There you go.
That was a song that made me think about that as well. So you're mayor for life, as coined by my friend Terry Minor.
Terry Miners.
So you're mayor for life, and you decide at the end of your term you're going to do something else. You decide to go into state government. Tell me about that transition to be.
Well, I had a lot of folks. You know, I'd been mayor for 21 years, and the governor came to me. I had looked at running for governor, and I just didn't feel it in my gut. The governor at the time was Steve Beshear, a longtime friend. When I was general counsel to John Y. Brown, he was attorney general. So we'd known each other for 30 years. So he came down, he and his wife, Jane, came to see Madeline, myself, and said, you know, you guys have got this local government stuff down pretty good after 21 years. How about helping me with cities and counties around the state? Come up and see it, and then maybe we can talk you into running for governor. And so we decided that we would try it, and we did, and we were fortunate to win. I spent about 3 years as lieutenant governor, sat through budget meetings right next to the governor as we were going through the issues of the state of Kentucky, dealt with tornadoes, got on Black Hawk helicopters and went out into the mountains and saw the destruction and, you know, wept with folks and went through the difficulties that unfortunately the young Governor Beshear is now going through in West Kentucky. And at the end of about 3 years, I decided that I didn't have it in my gut, that burning desire to be governor. And I told him, I said, I'm not going to run. And he said, you know, you got to. Anyway, we talked about a lot of different options, and I just said, I'm not going to run. I'm going to go back to Louisville at the end of the term, and I'm going to teach. That's what I really enjoyed doing. Well, about 3 weeks after that announcement, and I went public with it because if anyone was going to run for governor, they didn't have to worry about the lieutenant governor. I wanted to let them know I wasn't running. About 3 weeks after that, I got a call from the White House. And I had been active as president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and I'd been active over the years with lots of folks in Washington. And the guy says to me, you know, the guy whose job I took says, I'm leaving. And I'm going to take a 7-figure job on Wall Street. That's like $1 million or more. And he said, you know, I just wanted to call you and tell you I'm leaving. And I said, Steve, you know, I thought you were going to go back to Charleston, South Carolina and run for mayor. We all thought you were going to do that. Now I got little kids. This is my opportunity to make a lot of money. I got my Rolodex with all the mayors and governors I'd worked with throughout the country for the last 5 years. I'm gonna take it and I'm gonna cash it in. So I called him every name in the book, and I said, but at the end of the conversation, I said, let me tell you, Steve, if you see any more of those 7-figure jobs floating around, you let me know. I'd be more than happy to go with you. And he laughed and hung up. 2 weeks later, I get a call from his boss, a woman named Valerie Jarrett. And Valerie said, I've been talking to Steve. He says you'd be the best. You're leaving the state of Kentucky, or you're not leaving. You're not going to run for governor, you've decided. So what about coming up here? I said, Valerie, I started with Jimmy Carter as president. I've worked with all the presidents up through President Obama. And the problem I always have is that you in Washington, you do a lot of talking, but you never do any listening. You never listen to mayors. You never listen to county officials. You never listen to state officials. And, I just don't, I think it'd be a waste of time. She said, well, it's very different in this administration. She said, if there's a domestic meeting anywhere in the White House you want to attend on housing, education, healthcare, whatever, we want you in that meeting. I said, she said, well, come up and let's talk. So I talked with my wife, and she said, yeah, let's give him a chance. So I flew up, and I spent the whole day at the White House with the chief of staff, with Valerie, met with everybody except the president. Mm-hmm. And they all kept saying, you've got the experience. We'd like to know what you think from the state perspective, city perspective, et cetera. So I came home, and I said to my wife, if they're telling the truth, I really do think I can help. Mm-hmm. So maybe we ought to think more about it. Excuse me. About a week later, I get a call, pick up the phone. Jerry Abramson, yes. Can you hold for the President of the United States? I said, no, I'm busy. No, and I laughed, and she laughed, and she said, hold on, please. It was President Obama. He said, Mayor, he said, we're in the final quarter of this administration. And there had just been a Super Bowl game with Seattle, and I can't remember who they were playing, where right at the final quarter, the whole game switched. He said, I need your help for this final quarter. Well, what do you say? I mean, it's President of the United States. Mm-hmm. You salute and soldier on. I mean, I said, I'll be there. And so 3 weeks later, I resigned. And a week later, I found an apartment for more money than my mortgage. And it was 800 square feet, but I could walk to the White House. Because I didn't have a car. And I left my wife here because she was so involved. She is so involved in civic and community activities. No reason to sit in that 800 square foot apartment when I leave at senior staff met at 7 a.m. So I was getting up at 5:30. I was leaving at 6:30, quarter to 7. Was there at 7, and I stayed till 8:30, 9 o'clock, 6 days a week. Mm-hmm. But it was great. And working with President Obama was a highlight of my life. And it was just, I learned so much, and being in the West Wing, there was only 43 people in the West Wing. Mm-hmm. The rest of the White House is in the executive office building, where there's another 700-800 people who carry business cards that say White House. Well, I was in the West Wing, right above the Oval, literally. And it was a tremendous experience, and I stayed with him until we all walked out on the 17th of January.
Tell me a story about President Obama.
He was a tremendous sense of humor. I'll give you a great story. We flew in on Air Force One. He was going to give a speech here in Louisville. And as we got out the plane, he said, Jerry, he said, why don't you ride with me downtown to the speech? And he had invited John Yarmouth, the congressman, to also come. So John's in the car, and I'm in the car, and we're coming down 65, and they stop all the traffic when you're with the president. And I point over to Brook and Breck, Louisville Male High School. Mm-hmm. I said, Mr. President, that's where Louis Brandeis went to school. He said, Jerry, Louis Brandeis from Massachusetts. He didn't go to school there. He went to high school in Massachusetts. He went to Harvard College, Harvard Law School. I said, okay, with all due respect, Mr. President, I was the mayor here for over 2 decades. So he laughed. So he goes to give the speech. We fly back. The next day, I'm walking through the hallway, and I'm coming around, and he's coming toward, and we bump into each other right there, literally on the first floor of the White House. And he looks at me, and he says, I Googled it last night, and you're right. Louis Brandeis was a Louisvillian and did go to Male High School. I said, thank you very much, Mr. President. He grabbed me, gave me a big hug, and then went on to whatever he was on his way to. Great mind, brilliant thinker, focused. He was the kind of guy who every night he would go up to the private residence with a stack of memos about yay thick. Mm-hmm. And I received those same memos. So I knew what he was looking at. The senior staff received them. And if there was a memo if there was an issue, each one of them was an issue. If there was an issue that they wanted a local government perspective on, I had input. And in every one of those memos, whoever had input from wherever they needed to have it, had it before it got to him. Mm-hmm. And then it gets to him. And at the end of his reading of the memo, it says, I agree, I disagree, I need more information. when I'd be at senior staff meetings in the morning, if the chief of staff would say, Jerry, I need to see you after the meeting, that meant there was a question on something that I had participated in. And we would walk into because we met in the Roosevelt room every morning. We'd walk right across the hall into the Oval, and there was the president. And he would say, Jerry, here's the issue. I don't understand this, or you didn't answer that, or whatever. And here's this guy every night. He's doing these memos, doing these readings and understanding, and just focus like a laser beam. They always said that about Clinton. President Obama was the same way, and just he just was an energizing force to be with, brilliant, articulate, and just made me very proud to be a part of his administration.
Okay, so you walk on January the 17th.
Yep.
And you're back in Louisville now.
Come back to teach, and I'm teaching at Spalding University. Tori Murden, the president, who rode across the Atlantic, along with her Smith degree and her Harvard degree and her U of L Law School degree. And she worked with me the first term I was in office as mayor. I hired her. Now she hired me, and I worked for her.
So public service over?
Yeah, I think public service is over if you think teaching's not public service. I'm involved with a lot of organizations. I sit on the board of the Community Foundation. I think that is focused on the public service. I sit on the board of Dare to Care, and my deputy mayor, Bill Summers, and I, during COVID, the worst year of COVID, we went to Dare to Care at 28th and Virginia every Tuesday and worked for 3 hours to make meals for kids who needed food. We now go once a month. But we're both serving on the Dare to Care board. So we're doing the kinds of things that still make a difference in our hometown. And recently, Governor Beshear appointed me to the board of the University of Louisville Board of Trustees. So I've been doing that for the last 3 months, which I think he thought he was doing me a favor, but I'm not so sure with everything that's been going on. So, public service means making the community better. I try to do that every day.
Let me ask you a question. If you were to write your own autobiography, and I've asked this question before, if the book was to be entitled, what would you entitle your book?
A boring title would be A Career in Public Service, but I would hope it would be something that would be inspirational, something that would get people to realize, as I try to do every time I speak to high school groups, college groups, all around the community and actually around the country. I go to IU every semester to teach a full day of classes. I go to Boston University each semester to teach 2 or 3 classes. I'm trying to get young people to understand public service is a wonderful career. Making money is you make enough money, it's okay, but helping people and making a difference in a positive way to make your hometown, your state, your country a better place is a tremendous career, and a lot of folks overlook it. And so that I would try to work with a title that would focus on public service is a career you ought to think about seriously.
Well, let me tell you this. I want to close this with one little story about me regarding you. I've been a lawyer for a long time now. Now I'm a judge, obviously. But I was thinking about public service for a long time. When I came to the University of Louisville, I'm from Indianapolis, and I remember being on the basketball team, and I walked through the Galleria. I saw you. I had never met you, and you didn't know who I was, I'm sure, because I wasn't playing at the time. But you went up to a lady who was walking around and looked like she was lost in Galleria. You went up to her and said, "Hi, I'm Jerry Abramson. I'm the mayor. You look like you're lost. How can I help you?" I remembered that, and that was the first opportunity I had a chance to hear you, see what you were offering to other people. And I saw another instance, I'm not going to go into what it was, but it made me think that this is a guy that wants to do something better for the community, and that really inspired me. One of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show was because I just basically want to tell you thank you. You actually inspired me to be kind of who I am today, wanting to serve the community, and it started somewhere, and it actually started by looking at people like you. So I just want to say thank you. And I remember that, and I wanted you to know that's what I remember you from.
Well, I really appreciate that, and you should be proud of what you've been able to attain, and this community is a better place because of the way you have served and your willingness and commitment to your new hometown, not so new anymore, here in Louisville. So thank you very much.
Well, I appreciate that. I will tell you this, as we started the show, there's no way I could get everything in 30 minutes. And I want to bring you back for a part two because there's so many things I want to dive into.
We'll do it.
But we're going to have to bring the show to a close because of time constraints. But as we like to close this show, I always like to say something like, it's not a matter of what you think, it's not a matter of what I say. At the end of the day, it's all a matter of perspective. Mayor, thank you very much for being here.
Great to be with you, Judge.